You tell her to come down here, walk right up to me, and kiss me on the...
Hello! It's me, Antonio D'Amico. This is Pointy Hat, and welcome to D&D with a Twist. The show where I take one of those D&D books that I make people wash their hands before touching, I open it on a random page, and decide to wreck whatever I land on. It could be a class, it could be a race, it could be a magic item, it could be you, or a monster. This time it's a monster. You've been spared. For now. I talk about whatever that thing is in D&D, and then I give that thing a twist that you can use in your own games for 100% free. You know the drill by now. So when I think of genies, I think of...
seen her pictures, I said, "Ow, jump scare."
Genies are the monsters for people that won't let go of The Last Airbender and attention-hogging streamers. Genies are elementals, the often forgotten food group of the monster pyramid. And it's often forgotten for good reason. There are just not that many of them, and those that are there are not terribly interesting, but genies are the exception to this. They are big players in the elemental planes that surround the material realm. To make a terribly long story short, the inner planes are the planes closest to the material realm, that's where normal people live. The elemental planes are at the borders of the inner planes, and they are Pokemon type themed. You have the plane of fire, the plane of earth, the plane of water, and the plane of air. Those are the planes where genies live, and they are also Pokemon themed. But to those not super familiar with the D&D version of genies, this might seem weird. Genies are one of those monsters that is very much not a D&D original, and they aren't particularly themed around the elements in fiction or mythology. Well, they are, but just one. So how about we talk a little bit about what genies in folklore are before we delve into pro D&D gamer territory. But before we do that, I want to tell you a rumor. There are many evils in the world, evil fae princes, giant lycanthropes, practitioners of the darkest magic, and even Daniel. Most reassure themselves by saying that if they ever work together, it's by chance. Just an ill turn of fate that makes it so someone is at the wrongest of places at the wrongest of times and has to suffer the fury of both a vampire captain and her undead crew and a gargantuan snail hydra at the same time. But there are others that whisper of a darker plot. They say that these big bats might be working together, and what's worse, in service of someone. And that someone might be you. Or at least it is if you back Big Bats, the 2-volume collection of big bats to use in your own games. And these are truly the most baddest, evilest, ugliest, most disgustingest— oh, sorry Daniel, sorry sweetie, I didn't mean you. I love you. Mwah. But yes, you got that right. These are 2 entire books dedicated to just a bunch of evil guys that you can unleash on your players, and the people at Hit Point Press got you covered. There's everything you could ever want. I've named some of my favorites like the Ivory Prince and Jarl Tenor, but you have stuff like the Malcolm, which are literally a crew of rats in the vague shape of people, or Karsus, which is the worst possible tree, or Daniel, my love. Side note, check out this art. They even got minis of these guys, Jesus Christ. There are 25 of these big bats and more to come through stretch goals. And these evil bad guys are not just stat blocks you chuck at players. They come with backstories to give them depth, minions to make fights dynamic, tactics to run these fights, and more. There are a total of 100 monsters and magic items in these volumes, and you can use the big bats in one-shots, as mini bosses for a long arc, or hell, even the BBEG of your whole campaign. And what's more, my little story about these monsters working together is not just there for flavor. They have the Big Bad Bureau, a literal organization that you can join as a player. So if all of this sounds like a good time for you, go to the description of this very video and check out the Big Bad Kickstarter. It is literally live right now, so you can find out everything about it on the Kickstarter page. And thank you to Hit Point Press for sponsoring this video. So it's pretty common for nerds to know this, but genies come from Jinn, or Jinn with a D. Both are accepted, you pedants. Jinn are creatures that predate and are also part of Islamic culture and belief system. I'm going to be real with you, Jinn are fascinating and much more interesting than their D&D counterparts. There are of course many schools of thought and different interpretations as to what Jinn are, where they come from, and what they do, and this is just one of my silly, goofy D&D videos, so I'm just gonna give you the super basics. Common threads are that Jinn are basically counterparts to humans. They are people with free will that can be good, bad, or in between, just like, you know, people. They have their own societies, they eat, they drink, they have kids. They are literally just another parallel society, sort of similar to the Celtic understanding of the Fae, but with a bigger emphasis on Jinn working similarly to people. Except unlike humans, Jinn are stated to be powerful in a supernatural way. What they can do exactly varies wildly and is contested even more widely, but common themes are possession, illusions, curses, and blessings.
Boom, I have to hit them with a bless you.
They are commonly associated with fire, with many pre-Islamic and Islamic cultures believing them to be made of fire, contrasting with humans who are said to be made of clay. They are invisible, and some see them as living in a literal alternate dimension to ours, but they are able to cross into our dimension and influence it. Their intentions when they do so vary wildly by culture. In Morocco, there's a big emphasis on Jinn possession and exorcism, whereas in Senegal, they're seen as helpful, particularly when it comes to healing the sick. By default, Jinn are just not that interested in humans though, and generally just ignore them. When they do interact with the human world, they often shapeshift into human form, or more commonly into animals. Black animals, and especially black snakes being their favorite. Very goth core of them. Cool, mythology crash course over. Hope you took notes because this will be on the test. So what do D&D Genies take from this? Worthy enough? Some, and not much at the same time. Genies in D&D live in the elemental planes and are born in them. So here's how they happen. Pay attention because I plan on using this later. Sometimes a mortal soul makes its way to one of these planes. Either it dies there or goes sightseeing, I guess, and the elemental building blocks jump the shit out of the soul. Just utterly go to town on that poor soul.
I'll get her forehead, you get her kneecap.
Once the massacre is done, the soul has been so thoroughly blended with the elemental blocks that jumped it that what results is a genie. Genies don't retain any of the personality of the soul, but they do retain some of the physical attributes of it. This kind of brings me back to the stuff D&D has ignored from Jinn lore. To me, one of the cool things about Jinn is that they are this alternate society of beings that are very similar to humans with their own laws and culture. They are an entire civilization of individual Jinn and are extremely different, just like people, with some being good, some being mean, some being anything in between, bars. But genies in D&D are very much not that. Their whole personality is based on their element. Yep, once again, my dreaded nemesis, alignment. Fire genies are mean and air genies are nice. Why? Who knows? To make it more boring, I guess. It's not like fire is intrinsically a mean element or air a good one. I think this stings even more because if they were made out of souls, they could have just have the moral outlook of whatever soul was used in their creation. You could have made them complex individuals, but they sure are not that. Anyway, if while I was going on about all that, you were just screaming at your smart fridge, I assume you watch these on the most inconvenient electronics you can find for fun. You were just screaming, when do I plan to talk about wishes and lamps? It's now. So as you may have noticed, I never talked about wishes a single time when talking about the mythological Jinn, and that's because they have nothing to do with it. The whole idea of genies trapped in lamps granting wishes is debatably a modern invention. The first mention of anything remotely similar to that comes to us through the book Arabian Nights, and this was oral history translated to a book that was then translated to French in the 18th century, so very powerful ancient game of telephone vibes happening here. It was written by a French guy. Why are the French always to blame? Est-ce que vous pensez que ça me fait plaisir de me moquer des Français? Oui, peut-être. Anyway, this French guy decided to add some news stories to it that he just decided to make up for fun.
I'm so creative like that.
So the quality of the source is debatable. This is the first mention I've come across of trapped genies granting wishes when liberated. King Solomon was involved in one, it was a whole thing, we don't have time for it. But since this was what introduced the concept of the genie to the West, it very quickly made its way through popular culture. Disney got involved, Aladdin happened, Robin Williams injected every ounce of charisma and pure raw power he had in a Disney adaptation, and that's how it trickled down to D&D. In D&D, genies are trapped in lamps or any magical item by a spell. And this is a spell you can cast yourself, so if you want to do some crimes against nature and contain a thinking, feeling creature instead of a Pez dispenser, you can do that, you sicko. The wish part, however, is more complex. Genie wishes in D&D are complicated. In 5e, only noble genies, more powerful versions of the normal genies, can grant wishes. I think this is kind of a shame, honestly. D&D genies are way more based on the pop culture understanding of genies than any mythological figure. And to me, the most important aspect of genies in pop culture are their wishes. Making it so only noble genies can grant wishes kind of defeats the purpose of them to me. But let's say you manage to procure a wish from a noble genie. What does that entail? We can take a look at older editions and see what the rules to genie wishes are. First, genie wishes can only affect the present. So if you think of a sick comeback to what your bully said to you 4 days ago while you cry in the shower, you can't ask a genie to bring you back in time to enact your retribution. This also means the future, by the way, so no lottery number snitching allowed either. Genies cannot give you something intangible, like a noble title, but they can make you seem like you have one. But this is just the plot of Aladdin though, so we know how that ends. Genies are also all about consent, so they can't change how someone feels. So no love wishes or friendship bracelet wishes. Finally, genie wishes cannot create something. If you ask the genie for an elephant, it won't create a brand new elephant, but rather grab an elephant from somewhere and teleport it to you. probably 60 feet above you to kill you, so be careful.
I wanted those elephants.
This brings me to stipulations. Genies have a very robust legal team, and your traditional gotchas won't work here, you clever little boy. No granting more than 3 wishes to a creature. No granting a wish to a genie. No wish can grant other wishes. And, of course, there's the whole be careful what you wish for thing. Genies are known to grant wishes in the worst possible way, monkey paw style. But is that the case in D&D? Well, yes and no. Genies grant wishes differently depending on the element of the genie. And we've danced around this long enough, so how about we talk about these different types of genies? Jinn are air genies, and they are the only good ones, being chaotic good. Although I'm side-eyeing that good a lot. You see, the thing about genies is that they love having interns. Yep, it's this again. Internship is big in genie culture, one of the cornerstones of their society, actually. I knew this was bound to happen again. I had talked about way too many monsters that didn't own slaves. We were bound to go back to it. So genies basically thrive off of being admired and worshipped. They really care about being constantly praised, just like me. Apparently, they don't really care if the person admiring them actually admires them, as long as they pretend to do so out of fear, because genies solve this by amassing interns. The justification for Jinn being defined as good and still owning interns is that they are nice to them. They are really more like servants, you know? Servants that have not chosen to be servants and can't stop being servants.
Bombastic side-eye.
But they're doing it in nice outfits, so it's fine.
Criminal offensive side-eye.
So yeah, totally chaotic good, we swear. As the genies of the element of air, Jinn are all about freedom. Okay, but they still got slaves, got it. Their society is structured very loosely, with few laws to constrain the Jinns' need to do whatever at all times. They still have nobles and a caliph that ruled all of them, from the Court of Ice and Steel, which is surprisingly not a young adult novel title. Their cities are exactly what you would expect. Big floating islands in the elemental plane of air, with their capital apparently being a chunk of rock and ice constantly falling at terminal speed like a never-ending amusement ride. As a whole, they are defined by being pretty chill, enjoying praise like all genies, but generally liking mortals, messing with them in not life-threatening ways for the most part, and being surprisingly okay with being servants, you know, for a genie that is all about freedom. This handwave by saying that they believe in fate and see servitude as something that was bound to happen for a little while. Only noble Jinn can grant wishes, and when it comes to genie wishes, these are the guys you want to ask. They are nice. Allegedly. Next up, the Merid, the water genies. Side note, all the names of these are just other Islamic mythological figures thrown in with genies just because. Merid and Ifrit are demons, not jinns, and Jinn with a D is just the correct romanization of the word genie. No clue what Dao is though, not Islamic from what I can tell. The more you know. Air Jinn were our first and only genie aligned good, so we enter neutral territory. Merid inhabit the plane of water, which is exactly what you expect.
A world unlike any you have ever seen. Water world.
So Merid are generally not well liked, and that's because even other genies find them too conceited. As I said, genies enjoy flattery and veneration, and Merid really enjoy it, to the point of wearing the other genies out. Merids treat anyone that isn't another Merid as inferior, including other genies, and then they believe themselves to be the best Merid that has ever merited. They particularly dislike Dao and Ifrit, we'll get to them, but generally tolerate the Jinn and humans. These last ones are used as, you guessed it, interns. The reason why they take humans as interns despite, you know, living underwater is precisely because anybody that couldn't breathe water naturally was dependent on the Merid keeping up their water breathing, which makes humans in the forced service of a Merid less likely to run away and more likely to stay against their will, spending their whole lives in internship. Not evil though, chaotic neutral somehow. They also apparently have a soft spot for artists and musicians, which they like to keep around their courts as a sign of wealth. So if you want to get rid of the bard in your party, this might be the monster for you. And speaking of courts, you know how only noble genies can grant wishes? Same goes for Merid. The problem there is that Merids are so conceited that every Merid has a noble title of some sort and believes themselves to be the most important Merid. Actual noble Merids ignore this, but good luck trying to decipher who is and isn't a noble Merid that can grant a wish if you need one. Third in line are the Dao, the Earth Genie. They live in the plane of, say it with me now, Earth. And they are bad. The reason why they're bad is because they are the most into internships of all genies. Oh, so when they do it, it's bad. Okay, got it. Solid logic. They are the most industrious out of all the genies, and their society is probably the most functional one. And it rests in the back of, you guessed it, interns. Dao have carved the elemental plane of Earth, which is generally just an awful place to be, and shaped it to their liking. They are big on mining, industry, and craftsmanship. So so like dwarves. They do this because they are mainly defined by greed, to the point where they get stupid about it. Flattery won't get you far with the Dao, they are far too boring for that, but you could even manage to fool and trap one by playing into their insane avarice. More on why you wouldn't want to do that later though. To maintain their thriving mining MLM, Dao are always looking for more interns to recruit, and will put them through hell and back to get what they want out of them. They are also very much not above kidnapping particularly competent craftsmen and add them to their intern army. So if you didn't want to get rid of the bard but the artificer, this is the monster for you. Noble Dao can grant wishes, but apparently they'll do their absolute best to twist your wording to make you have the worst possible time. So even if they are relatively easy to catch by, I don't know, throwing a shiny coin into a trap and imprisoning them forever, they are one of the worst choices to ask for wishes, as they'll always try their hardest to grant it in the worst possible way. And lastly, Efreet. Genies of fire. These guys sure are evil. Lawful evil, in fact. They live in the plane of fire, and more specifically in the city of Brass, which is an actual location from Arabian Nights, go figure. Efreet's whole deal is that they work by survival of the strongest rules. To an Efreeti, might makes right, and since they tend to be more powerful than anyone, they just so happen to find themselves at the top of that hierarchy, just by chance. Out of all the genies, they are the most aggressive and warmongering. Their whole lawful deal relates to the fact that they operate a city and are capable of somewhat doing that correctly, but rest assured, we still have some interns thrown in there. Most of them are used for menial labor, but many are also conscripted, against their will of course, in armies as soldiers. Efreet are militaristic and aggressive, so they kinda need their interns to follow suit. In terms of wishes, I found something interesting about how any wish granted by an Efreeti had to be reviewed by an Efreeti higher in the hierarchy, which sounds neat and fits the whole lawful vibe, but the source of this is back in the TSR days, so it's been a while. Now, those four are the important ones, but before we go, I want to take a small detour here and talk about the Khayal. Now, I'm really not gonna talk about these guys for long, but I did want to talk about them a bit, because I find the way they're born very, very interesting. One could say I have been inspired by it. If you want to hear a full breakdown and get an updated 5e stat block for these guys, y'all should really head over to the Dungeon Dad's video on them. I'll put a card for it on the upper right corner of the screen. Just click on the little eye when you're done with this video. He really goes into detail with them, but I'm just gonna give you the Cliff's Notes version. So what are the Khayal? Well, the best way I can describe them is that they are the edgy genies, in that they are aligned not with one of the four boring elements, but with shadow. No, not that one. Khayal are born when a soul does not bind with any of the energies from the elemental planes, but rather with the shadow magic from the plane of shadow, the Shadowfell. They are the absence of an element given genie form, a genie of shadow. Why do I find this interesting? Well, it tells me that souls can bind with not just the four elements, but with the energies of other planes, even with magic, and create genies. And I find that interesting. Anyway, so we've looked at D&D genies, the Jinn folklore, we've looked at the four big types of genies in D&D, and that's all well and good. But what if we gave genies a new twist? So you want to fight a genie.
There's a price to pay. I'm a genie in a bottle. You gotta ask me the right.
Genies are elemental sugar daddies that are born when a soul gets jumped by the building blocks of the universe. So real talk, I'm not gonna make the Jinn, as in the magical people made from fire similar to humans that live in a parallel universe with their own culture. I think that's amazing, but I think that's for someone from that culture to make. What I can do, however, is use the pop culture understanding of genies that D&D bases itself on, along with the lore that genies have in D&D, to make some new, interesting genies that fit into the game. So how do we go about that? Well, simple. Let's define genies in D&D at their most basic. Genies, 1, are born from souls that have melded with the building blocks of a plane. 2, grant wishes. That's it. That's the baseline. Easy. What can we do with that? First, wishes. The fact that genies grant wishes almost feels incidental in D&D. They can't grant wishes to other genies, and most of them live where mortals don't come very often. So it's not like it's a big part of their existence. Hell, most genies can't grant wishes at all. Only noble genies can. But granting wishes is the most well-known attribute that genies have in popular culture. It's literally their whole thing, and it feels so absent from D&D. I think we can fix that. We can make a genie that has wishes as a core aspect of their design. So what about the other part, the whole melding with the energies from a plane? Well, if you haven't guessed it by now, I find the implications that souls can blend with planes other than the elemental planes to create genies very interesting. But which plane should we pick? Well, I've talked about it in passing before, but we know that there are planes dedicated to good and evil. And we know that good and evil are literal forces of the multiverse in D&D, sources of power. What would happen if a soul melded with the essence of good or evil? Let's go. When a soul is lost traveling through the planes, the energies that empower each of these planes can meld with it. It's rare for this process to produce anything at all, but when it does, a genie is born. Most of the souls that undergo this process end their journeys in the inner planes, the Shadowfell, the Feywild, or more commonly, the elemental planes. But sometimes, very rarely, a lost soul that has led a particularly kind or wretched life might find itself attracted to one of the alignment planes, the planes built around the concepts of good and evil. The souls of people that were exceptionally gentle, compassionate, and charitable will be attracted by the good aligned planes, and the energies of those planes will be attracted to that soul in turn. After the melding process is done, a new type of Genie will emerge from the melding, a shebake. Contrary to other genies, shebake retained the general demeanor of the person whose soul was used in their making, and this, coupled with the force of pure good of the planes that birthed them, makes them different from all genies. Shebake are defined by their altruism. Contrary to what you may think at first, shebake only grant wishes to evil people. They specifically seek the most greedy, the most violent, the most selfish of mortals, and put themselves in their service. The trick is that shebake are more likely than any genie to twist the wording of a wish to make it so the wish ends up generating more good in the world. Their goal is to change the evil person's outlook and demeanor one wish at a time, showing the person that they can make the people and the world around them better themselves. Shebake are the embodiment of good, but they are not stupid. If a person fails to see the error of their ways after receiving the continuous help of a shebake, this one will turn against their master, angered by their dogged refusal to become a better person. The reason why shebake want to help the worst of society at all is first because they believe this to be the moral thing to do, but secondly, because more people becoming good will potentially increase the number of shebake and decrease the number of their sworn enemies. A lubek is what happens when a soul that led a particularly evil life makes their way towards the evil aligned planes and melds with the evil energies of those planes. Lubek are the opposite of shebake in many ways, but both are also very similar to one another. Lubek also retain the general demeanor of the soul that was used in their creation, and also travel to the material realm to grant wishes to mortals, but where shebake were defined by their altruism, Lubek are defined by their selfishness. Lubek only grant wishes to the kindest, most gentle, most selfless people they can find in the material realm. Instead of twisting the wishes of these people into doing good, they wait for them to slip, to have an unkind thought, a selfish thought. And then they make that thought a reality. Any person, no matter how kind, selfless, and gentle, has felt envy or has wished ill on someone they despise, and a Lubeik will wait in the darkness for those thoughts to bubble up to the surface and make those dark wishes a reality. They do this to corrupt moral people and drive them away from leading the good lives they were leading. This will in turn increase the number of Lubeik and decrease the number of shebake. These two genies are locked in an eternal war of attrition, desperately trying to increase their numbers and decrease the numbers of their enemy. Someone that started as the worst of society and managed to change into someone kind and charitable, or conversely, someone that started as particularly good and kind and changed into a selfish, evil monster, might find upon their death that their soul melts with the energies of good or evil. This is how noble shebake and Lubeik are born. Only those that have undergone that transformation during their life can become the noble version of these genies, more powerful and more determined than any of their kind to stop their counterparts from influencing mortals in the opposite direction. And so, the war between shebake and Lubeik goes on, with mortals as pawns in their game. That's neat, I think. Shebake and Lubeik are all about wishes. It's literally the core of their design, and they are a brand new type of genie that works with the established rules of how genies work in D&D while bringing something completely new to the table. If a genie's moral outlook must be defined by their place of origin, and you know how much I hate that, I think it makes much more sense if they come from a literal good or evil plane rather than make the Earth genie evil because absolutely no reason. Shebake and Lubeik also offer plenty of reasons for a party to interact with them, since contrary to the elemental genies, these ones actually like hanging out in the material plane. Imagine watching a good, kind, but also desperate person believe they can outsmart a Lubeik and use their wishes to further their cause, only for the party to watch as they slowly descend into becoming what they hated most. Or imagine following the journey of this good-for-nothing, selfish guy and the kind shebake accompanying them. Those could make for great NPCs, or hey, great PCs. You can play them. So yeah, that'd be nice. It's just a shame that this is just a thing that I cooked up here in this video. You'll have to make them happen if you want to do that. Oh, wait, what's that? You're telling me that the Lubeik are in the description of this very video? And you can use them right now? For free? What? Yes, you guessed it. The Lubeik are done and ready to use in your own games. Just head on to the description of this very video and grab them for 100% certified free. So go out there, buy some shoe polish, and start rubbing some lamps until a CGI monstrosity comes out. And that's Genies. Genies are not my favorite in D&D. As I said, I am not a big fan of the big 4 elements being used anywhere. I just find it way too overused and boring for me. But I often find that the things I'm generally not particularly interested in tend to make for better content for these videos because I actually have things to change about them. I have so many ideas for new genies. What about Feywild genies? What about genies based on other elements? So many possibilities. I chose to flesh out the stat block for the Lubeik for this twist because I think it has the most storytelling opportunities in game. Although I love the other one just as much. So I think we might revisit this some other time. Oh, also important, thank you to my friend Sarah for helping me with all the Islamic lore in this video. Sarah is an extremely talented artist. You can check out her Twitter right here. I'll put it in the description. She also helped me to come up with the names for shebake and Lubeik. Bonus points if you can tell me in the comments for what those stand for. I think those are much better names than the normal D&D Genie names. So yeah, thank you for watching this one. I hope you liked it. I worked hard on it, that's for sure. So if you did, sharing this around would certainly help me a ton. Liking, commenting, subscribing. I'm awful at analytics, but YouTube tells me that a ton of people watch my videos without subscribing. Sharing the video also helps. I'm too scared of Reddit to do that myself, that's for sure. In any case, thank you for watching. Don't forget to clean your room.
I am your mother. You listen to me.
You never know if a genie is trapped in a cup you took there and then forgot to bring down to the kitchen and it's been a week. All right, end of the video. See you, love you, bye. Mwah.